The dying wolf at Isla's doorstep should have terrified her. Instead, his piercing golden eyes held an intelligence that made her question everything she thought she knew about the wilderness surrounding her mountain retreat. What she discovered when she chose compassion over caution would shatter her understanding of the world and reveal that sometimes the most dangerous predators come disguised as the most vulnerable souls. The autumn rain hammers against the windows of Isla's secluded cabin like angry fists, each drop a reminder of the storm brewing both outside and within her chest. She pulls her wool sweater tighter around her shoulders, watching the fire devour another piece of split oak with the same ruthless efficiency that her former colleagues had used to destroy her career 6 months ago. Dr. Isla Thorne. Former Dr. Isla Thorne, she corrects herself bitterly, had once been Seattle's most promising wildlife veterinarian. Her research on predator rehabilitation had been groundbreaking, her clinic thriving. Then came the incident that changed everything. The night she'd refused to euthanize a dangerous wolf that a wealthy rancher had demanded be put down. The wolf had been injured, not aggressive, but politics and money spoke louder than science. When she'd stood her ground, citing medical ethics and conservation law, they'd painted her as reckless, unstable. The smear campaign had been swift and merciless. Fabricated complaints about her emotional instability and poor judgment flooded the veterinary board. Her funding disappeared overnight. Colleagues who'd once respected her work suddenly found her too controversial to associate with. The final blow came when her research partner and ex-fiancé, Dr. James Morrison, testified against her character at the disciplinary hearing. He'd called her dangerously obsessed with predators, claiming she'd lost the ability to distinguish between helping animals and enabling dangerous behavior. Now she sits alone in her grandfather's hunting cabin, 30 miles from the nearest neighbor, surrounded by the very wilderness that had once been her life's passion. The irony isn't lost on her. The woman who dedicated her life to saving wild creatures now hides from the civilized world like a wounded animal herself. A sharp crack echoes through the night, distinct from the rain's constant percussion. Isla's head snaps up from her journal, pen suspended mid-sentence. The sound came from the front porch, deliberate and heavy. Not a branch falling or debris blown by wind. She sets down her journal and moves to the window, pressing her face against the cold glass. The porch light illuminates a small circle in the darkness, revealing nothing but empty wooden planks slick with rain. Yet something feels different, wrong. Her veterinary instincts, honed by years of reading animal behavior, prickle with awareness. Another sound reaches her softer this time, almost like a whimper. Isla's heart rate quickens. She knows that sound. Pain, distress, something hurt and seeking shelter. Moving quietly to the door, she presses her ear against the wood. The rain continues its assault, but underneath she hears it again. Labored breathing, the soft whine of an animal in agony. Every professional instinct screams at her to help, but the bitter memory of where helping had gotten her before makes her hesitate. Not your problem anymore, she whispers to herself, echoing the words the veterinary board had made painfully clear. You're not a vet. You're not anyone's savior. But even as she tries to convince herself to walk away, to return to her fire and her self-imposed exile, she knows she can't. The sound of suffering has always been her weakness, the very trait that had made her both an exceptional healer and, apparently, a professional liability. Isla unlocks the door and eases it open, wincing as cold rain immediately soaks her face. What she sees on her porch stops her breath entirely. A massive wolf lies collapsed against her door, his dark fur matted with rain and what looks like blood. He's enormous, easily twice the size of any wolf she'd studied in graduate school. His breathing is shallow, labored, each exhale creating small clouds in the frigid air. But it's his eyes that capture her completely. Even dulled by pain and exhaustion, they burn with an intelligence that seems almost human. golden amber orbs that find hers with desperate recognition. This isn't just any wolf. Something about him radiates power even in his weakened state, a presence that makes the hair on her arms stand on end. When their eyes meet, she feels it a connection that defies explanation, as if he's looking directly into her soul and pleading for something far beyond mere physical healing. Isla's hands tremble as she kneels beside him, professional assessment warring with impossible intuition. This wolf should terrify her. Instead, she feels drawn to him with a force that makes no logical sense. "What are you?" she whispers, her words barely audible above the storm. The wolf's golden eyes never leave hers, and in them she sees something that makes her question everything she thought she knew about the natural world. Rain continues to pound the mountainside as Isla crouches beside the collapsed wolf, her veterinary training warring with common sense. Everything she'd learned about wild predators screams danger. A wolf this size could kill her with a single bite, injured or not. But those golden eyes hold no threat, only a desperate plea that resonates deep in her chest. "Easy, boy," she whispers, extending her hand slowly. The wolf's massive head lifts slightly, nostrils flaring as he takes in her scent. His reaction surprises her instead of fear or aggression. Recognition flickers across his intelligent gaze, as if he's been searching for her specifically. Isla's fingers brush against his fur, and she gasps. Even soaked with rain, his coat feels different from any wolf pelt she'd examined in her research. Softer, yet somehow more substantial, as if each strand contains hidden strength. The moment her skin touches his, warmth shoots up her arm, not the fever of infection, but something else entirely. Something that makes her feel more alive than she has in months. The wolf whimpers, a sound so achingly human it makes her throat tight. Blood seeps from a deep gash along his left flank, and she notices other wounds, claw marks that suggest a territorial fight with something large and vicious. A bear, perhaps, or another predator. But the injuries seem too precise, too calculated, almost like he'd been hunted. "You're hurt," she murmurs, running her hands along his body with practiced efficiency. Her fingers find evidence of internal injuries, the way he favors his left side, the shallow breathing that suggests bruised ribs. Without proper treatment, he'll die before dawn. The rational part of her mind lists all the reasons to walk away. She has no license, no legal right to treat wild animals. The veterinary board had made that crystal clear. She has limited supplies, no backup if something goes wrong. Most importantly, she has no idea what she's dealing with. This wolf is unlike any she'd studied, and her instincts keep insisting there's more to him than meets the eye. But as she looks into those golden depths, she sees something that breaks her heart. The same desperate isolation she feels every day, the same bone-deep weariness of fighting battles alone. He's not just injured, he's lost, searching for sanctuary in a world that's turned hostile. "I know that feeling," she whispers. The wolf's breathing grows more labored, his eyes beginning to dim. Time is running out. Isla makes her choice the same way she always has, by following her heart instead of her head. "All right, big guy, let's get you inside." Moving carefully, she assesses how to transport him. Even injured, he must weigh at least 150 pounds, far too heavy for her to lift alone. But as she positions herself to try sliding him across the porch, the wolf seems to understand. With tremendous effort, he pushes himself up on his front legs, allowing her to support his weight as they move toward the door. The process is agonizing and slow. Each step draws soft whines from the wolf that tear at Isla's heart. But there's something remarkable about his cooperation. He seems to anticipate her movements, adjusting his weight to help rather than hinder their progress. It's the behavior of an intelligent partner, not a wild animal. Inside the cabin, warm light and dry air welcome them. Isla guides the wolf to a thick rug near the fireplace, where he collapses with a shuddering exhale. The contrast between his massive form and the cozy domestic space is jarring, like housing a force of nature in her living room. "Stay still," she instructs, rushing to gather her supplies. Her grandfather's old hunting cabin is well stocked with first aid materials, and her veterinary bag, the one thing she couldn't bring herself to leave behind, contains emergency medications she'd forgotten she had. When she returns, the wolf is exactly where she left him, watching her every movement with those unnervingly intelligent eyes. Most injured animals would be either unconscious or aggressive by now. This one seems to be studying her, learning her routines and mannerisms with careful attention. "You're not like other wolves, are you?" she says softly, preparing antiseptic solution. "I've worked with your kind before, and none of them ever looked at me the way you do." The wolf's ears prick forward at her words, head tilting slightly in what looks remarkably like curiosity. When she begins cleaning his wounds, he remains perfectly still despite what must be considerable pain. No snapping, no growling, just those golden eyes fixed on her face with unwavering trust. As she works, Isla finds herself talking to him the way she used to speak to her patients, about the weather, her loneliness, the cabin's history. To her amazement, the wolf seems to listen, his breathing growing calmer as her voice fills the silence. When she mentions her fall from grace, his gaze intensifies, as if he understands loss on a personal level. "There," she says finally, securing the last bandage. "You should heal, assuming you rest and don't do anything stupid." The wolf's response stops her cold. He lowers his massive head and touches his nose to her hand, in what can only be described as gratitude. The gesture is so human, so filled with conscious appreciation, that chills run down her spine. Outside, thunder rumbles across the mountains, and Isla realizes the storm is worsening. Even if the wolf could travel, sending him back into the night would be a death sentence. She's committed now, for better or worse. "I guess you're staying the night," she murmurs, settling into her chair by the fire. The wolf's golden eyes follow her, and she swears she sees relief flicker across his features. As the storm rages outside, woman and wolf regard each other across the warm space, both recognizing kindred spirits in exile. Neither realizes that this moment of compassion will change both their lives forever. Dawn breaks gray and muted through the rain-streaked windows, painting the cabin in soft silver light. Isla wakes with a start in her chair, neck stiff from sleeping upright. Her first thought is of the wolf, and she turns anxiously toward the fireplace where she'd left him. He's awake, watching her with those penetrating golden eyes. But something's different. The labored breathing has eased, and though he remains still, there's an alertness to his posture that suggests significant improvement. Impossible improvement. Actually, injuries like his should take weeks to show such progress, not hours. "Morning," she says softly, stretching the kinks from her spine. The wolf's ears perk forward at her voice, and his tail gives the slightest wag. The gesture is so domestic, so dog-like, that she has to remind herself this is a wild predator who could turn dangerous at any moment. Isla approaches carefully, kneeling beside him to check his wounds. What she finds defies medical explanation. The deep gashes that had been seeping blood 12 hours ago are now sealed with healthy pink tissue. The swelling has reduced dramatically, and when she gently probes his ribs, he shows no signs of the internal injuries she detected. "This isn't possible," she murmurs, running her hands along his flank. "You should be barely conscious, not." The wolf shifts under her touch, rolling slightly to give her better access to his injuries. The movement is deliberate, helpful, the behavior of a patient cooperating with examination, rather than a wild animal tolerating handling. Her scientific mind reels at the implications. Standing abruptly, Isla backs away from him, heart hammering. "What are you?" The question comes out sharper than intended, edged with fear that has nothing to do with physical danger and everything to do with her understanding of reality. The wolf tilts his massive head, studying her with an expression that seems almost amused. Those golden eyes hold depths of intelligence that make her skin prickle with awareness. She spent her career studying animal behavior, and nothing in her experience explains the consciousness she sees reflected in his gaze. Her phone buzzes on the kitchen counter, a text from her sister Elena checking in, as she does every few days since Isla's exile began. The normalcy of it grounds her, reminds her that there's a rational world beyond her cabin, where wolves are simply wolves, and miracles don't happen overnight. But as she reads Elena's concerned message asking if she's taking care of herself, Isla's eyes drift back to the wolf. He's still watching her, head cocked with what looks like patience, waiting for her to process whatever impossible thing is happening here. The smart choice would be to call wildlife services. Report an unusually large wolf with potential rabies. The rapid healing could be explained as some kind of neurological symptom making her misperceive his condition. They'd come with tranquilizer guns and transport him to a facility for testing. Safe, legal, responsible. The thought makes her stomach clench with revulsion. She knows what testing means when applied to potentially rabid predators. They'd kill him for samples, dissect his brain for microscopic examination. The memory of her last battle with authorities over wolf welfare comes rushing back, the helpless rage of watching politics override science, fear triumph over understanding. "I can't," she whispers, and the wolf's ears flick toward the sound. "I won't make that call." But keeping him presents its own dangers. If authorities discovered she was harboring a wild wolf without permits, her tenuous legal standing would evaporate entirely. The veterinary board would have grounds for permanent sanctions. She'd lose any chance of eventually rebuilding her career. More immediately, there's the question of what to do with him. He can't stay indefinitely, despite his miraculous healing. Wild animals belong in the wild, regardless of how extraordinary they might be. Yet something about this wolf suggests that simple logic doesn't apply. The way he watches her, responds to her voice, cooperates with treatment. It's as if he understands not just her actions, but her intentions. "You're not going to make this easy for me, are you?" she asks. The wolf's response stops her breath. He rises smoothly to his feet, movements fluid and powerful despite his recent injuries. But instead of heading for the door like any wild animal eager to escape confinement, he approaches her, slowly, deliberately, with none of the wariness she'd expect from a creature of the forest. When he reaches her, he does something that challenges every assumption she's ever made about wolf behavior. He sits calmly at her feet and places one massive paw on her hand. The gesture is unmistakably communicative, not dominance or submission, but something closer to partnership. A request for trust, perhaps, or an offer of alliance. Isla stares down at the paw covering her hand, its weight warm and reassuring. The wolf's claws could shred her flesh with minimal effort, yet his touch is gentle, controlled. She looks up to meet his gaze and finds herself drowning in molten gold that seems to see straight through to her soul. "You're asking me to trust you," she breathes. "But what are you asking in return?" The answer comes not in words but in understanding that flows between them like an electric current. He needs sanctuary. Yes, but more than that. He needs someone who won't run when confronted with the impossible. Someone willing to see beyond surface appearances to the truth beneath. Just as she needs someone who won't judge her for the choices that destroyed her old life. Thunder rumbles overhead as the storm system stalls over the mountains, promising days more rain. Even if she wanted to release him immediately, the weather makes travel treacherous. She has time to make her decision, but she already knows what it will be. "All right," she says quietly, her free hand coming to rest on his broad head. "But we do this carefully. And if you're what I think you might be." She pauses, the implications too vast to voice. "We're both going to need to trust each other completely." The wolf's golden eyes close briefly in what looks remarkably like relief. When they open again, Isla swears she sees gratitude burning in their depths. Not the simple appreciation of an animal for care received, but the profound recognition of one conscious being acknowledging another's leap of faith. Outside, rain continues to hammer the mountains, trapping them together in a space too small for secrets. Neither realizes that the choice made in this moment has set forces in motion that will reshape both their destinies. The Alpha King has found his sanctuary, and the healer who refused to abandon him has unknowingly claimed her place in a war between worlds. 3 days pass in a strange rhythm of domesticity and wonder. The storm system has stalled over the Cascade Mountains, turning the world beyond Isla's windows into a gray watercolor painting of rain and mist. Inside the cabin, an unlikely partnership has formed between woman and wolf that defies every rule of nature she's ever learned. The wolf she's taken to calling him Kale in her mind, though she couldn't say why the name feels right, has settled into the cabin's routines, as if he'd always belonged there. He sleeps by the fireplace at night, follows her movements during the day, and shows an uncanny ability to anticipate her needs. When she reaches for firewood, he's already positioned to help clear the path. When she cooks, he settles nearby but never begs or demands food. It's the behavior of a companion, not a patient. His healing continues at an impossible pace. By the second day, the wounds had completely closed, leaving only faint silver lines in his dark fur. By the third, even those marks have faded. Isla documents everything in her journal, taking photographs and measurements that she knows no one will ever believe. The scientific part of her mind catalogs anomalies, while the intuitive part recognizes magic when she sees it. "You're not just different," she tells him on the third evening, sitting cross-legged on the rug beside his massive form. "You're something else entirely, aren't you?" Kale's golden eyes meet hers with that now familiar intelligence. His response comes as it always does, not in words but in understanding that seems to flow directly between their minds. Images flash through her consciousness. Vast forests shrouded in moonlight, wolves running in perfect formation, a sense of ancient power and responsibility that takes her breath away. She jerks back, heart hammering. "What was that?" The wolf tilts his head, studying her with what might be concern. The mental connection, if that's what it was, fades, leaving only the faint echo of something vast and important just beyond her grasp. Isla's hands shake as she reaches for her journal, trying to capture the experience in words that feel inadequate. How do you describe the sensation of touching another consciousness? How do you explain the feeling that you've glimpsed something magnificent and terrifying that shouldn't exist in the rational world? Her phone rings, startling them both. Elena's name appears on the screen, and Isla realizes she's missed 3 previous calls. Her sister's worry will have escalated from concern to panic by now. "Hi, Elena," she answers, forcing normalcy into her voice. "Isla, thank God. I've been calling for hours. The weather service is saying that storm system over your area is historic. Some places have gotten 8 inches of rain. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Just reading by the fire." It's not technically a lie, though the presence of her extraordinary guest makes it feel like one. "You sound different," Elena presses, her tone sharpening with suspicion. "Happier, maybe? Less brittle." Isla glances at Kael, who's watching her with obvious interest. "Just getting some perspective, I guess. The isolation is educational." "G my Aladia. Well, don't let it turn you into a complete hermit. Mom's worried you're going to disappear entirely up there." Elena pauses. "You wouldn't, would you? Just vanish into the wilderness and never come back?" The question hits closer to home than her sister could know. Before Kale's arrival, disappearing had seemed like an increasingly attractive option. The world beyond her grandfather's cabin had nothing left to offer her. But now, "I'm not going anywhere," she says, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. After ending the call, Isla finds Kale watching her with an expression she's learned to recognize as his thinking face. His massive head tilts, ears pricked forward with attention that makes her feel like he's reading her soul. "She's right, you know," Isla tells him. "I was disappearing, Before you showed up, I was just existing, hiding from a world that decided I was too dangerous to be trusted with the thing I love most. Kale rises and pads over to her, settling beside her chair with careful precision. When he rests his head on her knee, the gesture is so full of comfort and understanding that tears spring to her eyes. "I saved your life," she whispers, running her fingers through his thick fur. "But somehow, I think you might be saving mine too." Outside, thunder rolls across the mountains like the footsteps of giants. The storm shows no signs of breaking, and Isla finds herself hoping it never does. In this suspended time between her old life and whatever comes next, she's found something precious: purpose without judgment, companionship without betrayal, and the first peace she's known in months. But as she sits beside her impossible wolf in the firelight, she senses undercurrents of change stirring beneath the surface. Kale's presence here isn't random, she's become certain of that. Whatever forces brought him to her door, whatever destiny they're stumbling toward together, it's bigger than a simple rescue. She can feel it building like pressure before an earthquake, a sense that their quiet sanctuary is merely the eye of a much larger storm. When the rain stops and the outside world intrudes again, nothing will ever be the same. But for now, in this moment of suspended possibility, woman and wolf guard each other's solitude and begin to heal from wounds that go deeper than flesh. Neither realizes that their growing bond is being watched from the shadows beyond the tree line, where golden eyes that mirror Kale's own burn with jealousy and rage in the darkness. The Alpha King's sanctuary is about to become a battlefield, and the woman who saved him will find herself at the center of a conflict that will test every assumption she's ever made about loyalty, love, and the thin line between civilization and the wild. Isla wakes on the fourth morning to silence. The constant drumming of rain that had lulled her to sleep for 3 nights has finally stopped, replaced by an eerie stillness that makes her skin prickle with unease. Pale sunlight filters through the cabin windows for the first time since Kale's arrival, painting everything in sharp relief that somehow feels wrong after days of gray softness. Kale is gone. Her heart lurches as she takes in the empty space by the fireplace, where his massive form had become as natural as the furniture. No warmth lingers in the spot where he'd slept, no indentation in the thick rug to suggest he'd ever been there at all. If not for the wolf-sized dent in her routine and the ache in her chest, she might convince herself she'd imagined the entire encounter. "Kale?" she calls softly, checking the small bedroom and bathroom, though she knows he's not there. The silence that answers feels different from her usual solitude, emptier, colder, tinged with abandonment. Outside, morning mist rises from the rain-soaked forest in ethereal columns that blur the line between earth and sky. The world looks pristine, reborn, as if the storm had washed away all traces of what came before, including, apparently, any evidence of her extraordinary guest. Isla makes coffee with hands that shake slightly, telling herself it's from the sudden drop in temperature. The rational explanation presents itself easily enough. Wild animals return to the wild when they're healed. It's natural behavior, what she should have expected, what she should want, as someone who understands the importance of not disrupting natural patterns. But as she sits in her chair by the fireplace, staring at the empty space where Kale had lain, rational explanations feel inadequate. The connection she'd felt with him had been real. That strange mental touch, the intelligence in his golden eyes, the sense of communication that transcended species barriers. She hadn't imagined those moments of impossible understanding. Had she? Her journal lies open on the side table, filled with 3 days of meticulous notes and observations. Photographs of his healing process, sketches of his unusual proportions, detailed descriptions of his behavior, physical evidence that something extraordinary had happened here, even if that something had vanished with the rain. The doorbell's sudden chime makes her jump, sloshing coffee across her journal's pages. She's had no visitors since moving to the cabin. The road is private, the location remote enough that casual drop-ins don't happen. Heart-hammering, she approaches the door with caution learned from months of solitude. Through the peephole, she sees a man standing on her porch. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair still damp from the morning mist. He's turned slightly away from the door, giving her only a profile view, but something about his posture, confident, alert, powerful, sends recognition shooting through her nervous system. When he turns toward the door, as if sensing her presence, Isla's breath catches. Golden eyes meet hers through the glass, the same molten amber that had watched her from wolf form for 3 days. The same impossible intelligence, the same depthless awareness that had made her question everything she thought she knew about the natural world. "Kyle," she breathes, though she knows that's impossible. Wolves don't become men. Not in the real world. Not in the world governed by veterinary science and peer-reviewed research and rational explanations for observable phenomena. The man on her porch tilts his head in a gesture so achingly familiar that her knees nearly buckle. When he speaks, his voice carries the same calm authority she'd sensed in the wolf's presence. "Hello, Isla. May I come in?" She opens the door without conscious decision, stepping back as he enters her cabin with movements that flow like water over stone. Up close, the resemblance is undeniable, not just the eyes, but the way he moves, the sense of contained power, the careful attention to her reactions. This is Kale, somehow transformed into human form, standing in her living room like a figure stepped out of mythology into mundane reality. "This isn't possible," she whispers, backing toward the fireplace, as if proximity to something familiar might anchor her to sanity. "Many things that are real seem impossible at first," he replies, staying carefully near the door. "I know this is difficult to process. I wanted to leave without complicating your life further, but..." He pauses, those golden eyes searching her face. "I couldn't go without explaining, without thanking you properly." "Thanking me?" The words come out sharper than intended, edged with the hysteria she's fighting to control. "You're thanking me? I think I'm having a breakdown here. People don't turn into wolves. Or wolves into people. This doesn't happen." "It does happen," Kale says gently. "It's been happening for thousands of years, hidden from human awareness for good reason. Most humans aren't ready to accept that their understanding of the world is incomplete." "Most humans?" she repeats, latching on to the phrasing. "But you think I'm different?" "I know you are." He takes a careful step closer, movements deliberate and unthreatening. "You saved me when every instinct should have told you to run. You saw intelligence where others would have seen only animal cunning. You looked beyond surface appearances to find truth underneath." His voice drops to barely above a whisper. "That's not something most humans are capable of." Isla's hands grip the mantelpiece behind her, needing solid support as her worldview crumbles and rebuilds itself around impossible realities. "What are you?" "I'm what your legends call a shifter. A wolf who can take human form, and a human who can become wolf." Kale's expression grows solemn. "I'm also something more, the alpha king of the Pacific Northwest packs, the leader my people look to for protection and guidance." The title hits her like a physical blow. Alpha King, not just any shifter, but their ruler, the most powerful of his kind, standing in her cabin, thanking her for veterinary care she'd provided without knowing his true nature. "The wounds," she says suddenly, pieces clicking into place. "They weren't from a bear fight, were they?" Kale's jaw tightens. "No, they were from challengers to my throne. Wolves who think they can lead better than I can, who've been stirring unrest among the packs." His golden eyes meet hers with raw honesty. "I was losing when I escaped to find sanctuary. Without your help, they would have succeeded in killing me. And now I'm healed, thanks to you. But the threat remains." He steps closer still, close enough that she can feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "Which is why I can't stay, much as I want to. My presence here puts you in danger you don't deserve." The thought of him leaving sends panic shooting through her chest. For 3 days, she'd found purpose again in caring for him. For the first time since her professional disgrace, she'd felt useful, needed, alive. The prospect of returning to her empty existence feels unbearable. What if I don't care about the danger? The words escape before she can stop them, surprising them both. Kale goes very still. "Isla, I'm already in exile," she continues, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Already abandoned by my own kind for trying to protect wolves. Maybe." She meets his gaze directly, finding courage in those golden depths. "Maybe I was meant to find a different pack." The silence that follows Isla's declaration stretches between them like a bridge neither dares cross. Kale's golden eyes search her face with an intensity that makes her feel transparent, as if he's reading secrets written in her soul. "You don't understand what you're asking," he says finally, his voice rough with an emotion she can't identify. "My world isn't the safe haven you think it is. It's brutal, ancient, governed by laws that would seem barbaric to someone raised among humans. More barbaric than destroying someone's career for refusing to kill an innocent animal?" Isla's voice carries the bitter edge of experience. "More brutal than watching colleagues smile to your face while stabbing you in the back? At least your people's violence is honest." Kale flinches, as if her words have struck him physically. "You think pack politics are cleaner than human ones? 3 days ago, my own beta tried to tear out my throat in front of witnesses who cheered him on. The wounds you healed weren't random, they were calculated attempts to cripple me, to make me weak enough that the next challenger would succeed." Despite his words, he moves closer, drawn by the same invisible force that's been pulling them together since the moment she found him on her porch. When he reaches her, he stops just out of arm's reach, close enough that she can see the pain flickering behind his fierce exterior. "My brother," he continues, the words seeming to cost him. "Darius, my own flesh and blood, standing with my enemies because he believes I've grown too soft to lead, too willing to coexist with humans instead of dominating them." His jaw clenches. "He may be right. Or maybe," Isla says softly, "you've evolved beyond the need to rule through fear." The comment earns her a sharp look, surprise flickering across his features. "Most of my pack would call that weakness. Most of my colleagues called compassion a liability too." She takes a step toward him, closing the distance he's been careful to maintain. Doesn't make them right. When she reaches up to touch his face, Kale goes rigid. His skin is fever warm beneath her palm, and she can feel the tension thrumming through him like a live wire. This close, she notices details that reinforce his otherworldly nature, the way his pupils dilate in response to her touch, the slight point to his canine teeth when he speaks, the silver threads in his dark hair that catch the light like moonbeams. "I can't stay," he whispers, but his hand comes up to cover hers, holding it against his cheek. "Every moment I remain here increases the danger to you. If Darius discovers where I've been hiding, if he realizes you're important to me." "Important?" The word sends warmth spiraling through her chest. "Is that what I am?" Kale's eyes close briefly, and when they open again, they burn with an intensity that steals her breath. "You saved my life when you had every reason to turn me away. You saw value in me when my own people questioned my worth. You offered sanctuary to a stranger who could have destroyed you." His free hand comes up to frame her other cheek. "You're more than important, Isla. You're—" He doesn't finish the sentence, but she hears the unspoken words anyway. She's what he's been searching for without knowing it. Not just a healer for his physical wounds, but someone who can see past the crown and the power to the man underneath. Someone who understands the weight of leadership and the cost of standing alone. "Then don't leave," she whispers. "Stay and fight. I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm choosing." Her hands slide to his shoulders, feeling the coiled strength beneath his skin. "For 3 days, I felt more alive than I have in months." "You think that's coincidence?" You think fate randomly dropped the Alpha King at my door? Kale's control cracks, revealing the vulnerability he keeps hidden behind kingly composure. If something happens to you because of me, then we'll face it together. She rises on her toes, bringing her face closer to his. I'm tired of running, Kale, tired of hiding. If your world is half as dangerous as you claim, maybe it needs someone willing to stand up to the brutality. You could die, he says desperately, but his arms come around her waist, pulling her against him as if he can't help himself. Humans don't survive shifter politics. The violence, the speed at which everything happens, you have no defense against what we become. I have you, she says simply. The words seem to break something inside him. His forehead drops to rest against hers, their breathing mingling in the space between them. I've ruled for 10 years, he whispers, led through wars, survived assassination attempts, made decisions that determined the fate of thousands, but I've never been as terrified as I am right now. Of what? Of how much I need you. His confession comes out raw, stripped of royal dignity, of how completely you've changed everything I thought I knew about strength and weakness and what it means to lead. Isla's heart hammers against her ribs as the full weight of what's happening settles over them. This isn't just attraction or gratitude or the temporary insanity of impossible circumstances. This is recognition, the meeting of two souls who've been searching for each other without knowing it. Then stop fighting it, she breathes. Stop trying to protect me from choices that are mine to make. When Kale kisses her, it's with the desperate hunger of a man who's found water after years in the desert. His lips are warm and demanding, claiming her with a possessiveness that should terrify her but instead makes her feel cherished, chosen, essential. She responds with equal fervor, months of loneliness and disconnection melting away under the heat of his touch. They break apart breathless, foreheads still touching, both shaking from the intensity of what's just passed between them. In his golden eyes, she sees her own wonder reflected back, the amazement of two people discovering that the fairy tales might be true after all. If I stay, Kale says quietly, everything changes, not just for us, but for both our worlds. A human mated to the Alpha King, it's unprecedented. It will shake the foundations of every pack in North America. Good, Isla replies fiercely. Maybe they need shaking. Outside, clouds gather on the horizon, promising another storm. But inside the cabin, surrounded by warmth and possibility, neither of them fears the coming tempest. They found something worth fighting for, and together they're stronger than any challenge the fates might send their way. What they don't know is that the challenge is already on its way, in the form of a silver-furred beta with murder in his heart and an army of dissatisfied wolves at his back. The Alpha King's sanctuary is about to become ground zero for a war that will determine the future of shifter kind, and the woman who changed everything is about to learn that love, like power, always comes with a price. 2 weeks pass in a haze of cautious happiness that feels too fragile to be real. Kale doesn't leave, despite his repeated insistence that he should. Instead, he helps Isla reinforce the cabin's defenses, teaching her to recognize the signs of shifter presence and the basics of supernatural combat. The lessons have an intimacy that goes beyond mere instruction, his hands guiding her stance, his voice low and warm in her ear as he explains vulnerabilities and strengths. They don't discuss the future beyond immediate survival. Neither wants to acknowledge how precarious their bubble of contentment really is, how easily the forces gathering against them could shatter this unexpected peace. Instead, they exist in stolen moments, shared meals by the fire, quiet conversations that stretch late into the night, the growing certainty that they've found something worth dying to protect. But on a Tuesday morning that dawns clear and cold, their sanctuary's isolation is finally broken. They've found us, Kale says, returning from his morning patrol of the property. His human form can't match his wolf senses, but he doesn't need supernatural awareness to recognize the signs. Tracks around the perimeter, fresh scent markers. Darius has been here, probably last night while we slept. Isla's blood turns to ice water. How many? At least 6, possibly more. Kale's jaw tightens with grim determination. He's brought a full hunting party. This isn't meant to be a negotiation, it's meant to be an execution. The words hit her like physical blows. But Isla forces herself to think practically. How long do we have? Hours, maybe less. They're positioning themselves for a coordinated attack. Kale moves to the window, scanning the tree line with predatory alertness. Darius isn't taking any chances this time. He means to finish what he started. Then we run, Isla says immediately. You know this terrain better than they do. We find somewhere safer. Call for help from your allies. There is nowhere safer. Kale's voice carries the weight of absolute certainty. And my allies are either dead or have already chosen sides. The packs that still support me are too far away to matter. He turns from the window to meet her gaze. This ends here, one way or another. The resignation in his tone sends panic shooting through her system. You're talking like you've already lost. Maybe I have. Kale approaches her with the careful movements of a man trying not to spook a wounded animal. Darius is right about one thing. I have gone soft. The old me would have killed him the moment he showed signs of rebellion. Would have made an example that kept the other potential challengers in line. The old you sounds like a monster, Isla says flatly. The old me was an effective king. Kale's smile holds no warmth. The new me falls in love with humans and forgets that mercy is a luxury leaders can't afford. His words cut deeper than any physical wound could. Is that what you think this is? A mistake that's compromised your ability to rule? I think, Kale says carefully, that loving you is the most dangerous thing I've ever done, and the most necessary. He reaches for her hands, his touch gentle despite the tension radiating through his frame. Which is why you have to leave. Now, before they tighten the circle. No. The word comes out flat and final. I'm not running while you stay here to die for honor or duty or whatever masculine idiocy is driving this decision. Isla, no, she repeats, jerking her hands free of his grip. You don't get to make this choice for me. You don't get to decide that my life is more valuable than yours, or that I'm too weak to stand with you when it matters. Kale's composure cracks, revealing the desperation underneath. You are too weak. You're human, no enhanced speed, no supernatural healing, no claws or fangs to defend yourself with. One swipe from Darius and you're dead, and I'll be too busy trying to protect you to fight effectively. Then teach me to be stronger, she shoots back. Give me whatever advantages you can, but don't you dare ask me to abandon you. I can't. His protest is cut off by a howl that rises from the forest, low and mournful and filled with challenge. The sound raises every hair on Isla's body and sends primitive fear racing along her nervous system. More howls join the first, creating a chorus of threat that speaks of violence and ancient grudges about to be settled in blood. Kale goes rigid, his human facade falling away to reveal the predator underneath. Too late, he says, voice already roughening with the beginnings of change. They're here. Through the windows, shapes move between the trees, wolves the size of ponies, their eyes glowing with supernatural light in the forest shadows. As Isla watches in horrible fascination, one of them steps into the clearing, and she sees Death walking on 4 legs. The wolf is massive even by shifter standards, his silver-gray coat gleaming like metal in the afternoon sunlight. But it's his eyes that steal her breath, golden like Kale's, but colder, hungrier, filled with the promise of violence that brooks no mercy. When he looks directly at the cabin, Isla feels his gaze like a physical touch, and she knows with absolute certainty that she's looking at her own death. Darius, Kale breathes, and the name carries 10 years of brotherhood turned to betrayal. Your brother? Isla whispers. My brother. Kale's form begins to blur at the edges, humanity giving way to something far more dangerous. And as of today, my executioner. The silver wolf throws back his head and howls again, the sound carrying across the mountain like a declaration of war. When he looks at the cabin again, his lips pull back to reveal teeth like ivory daggers, and Isla understands that the time for running, for hiding, for pretending they could build a life outside the reach of pack politics, has come to an end. The Alpha King's war has arrived at their doorstep, and she's about to discover whether love is strong enough to survive the brutal realities of a world where might makes right, and mercy is a fatal weakness. The standoff lasts 3 agonizing hours. Through the cabin windows, Isla watches the circle of wolves tighten around their sanctuary, moving with coordinated precision that speaks of military training and absolute loyalty to their silver-furred leader. Darius has positioned his forces strategically, cutting off every escape route, controlling every advantage, demonstrating the tactical brilliance that once made him Kale's most trusted advisor. Inside, Kale paces the small space like a caged predator, his human form barely containing the wolf that wants to burst free and meet the challenge head-on. But experience has taught him patience. The first to attack in a situation like this rarely survives, and he's determined not to hand Darius an easy victory. "Tell me about him," Isla says, needing to understand the enemy if she's going to be any help in the coming fight. "About what he was to you before this." Kale's golden eyes meet hers, pain flickering in their depths. "Everything," he says simply. "Brother, best friend, the only family I had left after our parents died. I trusted him with my life 1,000 times over the years. He saved me from more ambushes than I can count, stood beside me in every major battle, helped me build the coalition that brought peace between the warring packs." His voice breaks slightly. "I never saw this betrayal coming because I never imagined he could hate me enough to want me dead." "What changed?" "I did." Kale stops pacing, standing before the window with his back to her. "The king he helped create wasn't the king he wanted me to remain." Darius believes in the old ways: wolf superiority, human subjugation, rule through fear, and absolute dominance. When I started talking about coexistence, about finding common ground between our species, he shrugs, the gesture conveying volumes of regret. He saw it as weakness, as betrayal of everything we'd fought to build. Isla moves to stand behind him, her hands coming to rest on his shoulders. Even through his shirt, she can feel the tension coiled in his muscles, the barely contained violence of a warrior forced to wait. "He's wrong, you know. What you're trying to build, it's not weakness, it's evolution." "Is it?" Kale leans back against her touch, seeking comfort even as his gaze remains fixed on the enemy forces surrounding them. "Or is it the naive fantasy of a king who's forgotten what it means to be a predator?" "Look at me," Isla commands. And when he turns, she frames his face with her hands. "The Kale who collapsed on my doorstep was barely alive because he'd been fighting alone against impossible odds. The Kale standing here now is healed, stronger, ready to face whatever comes." That's not coincidence, that's what happens when you allow yourself to accept help instead of carrying every burden alone. "You healed my body," he says softly. "But what about my judgment? What about the decisions that led to this moment? Your decision to trust me saved your life," she points out. "Your decision to stay here instead of running has given you time to recover your strength. Your decision to believe in something better than endless war has attracted allies you don't even know you have yet." She kisses him gently, pouring all her faith and love into the contact. "Maybe your brother is right that you've changed. Maybe you're not the same king who ruled through fear and intimidation. But that doesn't make you weak, it makes you ready for what comes next." Before Kale can respond, a new voice carries across the clearing, human words spoken with absolute authority that cuts through the afternoon air like a blade. "Brother!" Darius calls, and Isla realizes with shock that shifters can speak even in wolf form when they choose to. "Enough of this cowardice. Come out and face me like the king you claim to be." Kale's entire body goes rigid, ancient instincts warring with tactical intelligence. The challenge is formal, public, witnessed by the gathered pack. To refuse would be to admit weakness in the most fundamental way possible. But to accept means abandoning the cabin's defensive advantages and facing 6-to-1 odds in open combat. He's baiting you, Isla says urgently, trying to make you act from emotion instead of strategy. I know. Kale's voice carries the weight of 1,000 similar decisions, but some challenges can't be ignored. If I cower inside while he questions my courage in front of witnesses, I lose regardless of whether I survive the fight. Then don't cower, Isla says, sudden inspiration striking. Meet the challenge, but on your terms, not his. Kale turns to look at her, interest flickering in his golden eyes. What do you mean? You're the Alpha King, she says, thinking rapidly. Which means you outrank him, right? You set the terms of engagement, not him. Use that authority. Understanding dawns across Kale's features, followed by something that might be hope. Single combat, he murmurs. Formal challenge under pack law, with the throne as stakes. If I can force him to accept those terms, then it's 1-on-1 instead of 6-on-1. Isla finishes. You like those odds better? Much better. Kale's smile carries the first genuine confidence she's seen from him since the siege began. Darius is strong, but he's always relied on allies to cover his weaknesses. In a fair fight, I can take him. Then let's make sure it stays fair, Isla says grimly. Kale's expression grows serious. This is the dangerous part, love. Once I accept the challenge, pack law governs everything that happens. If I lose, you won't lose, Isla says with fierce certainty. Because you're fighting for something he can't understand, not just survival, but the future. Not just victory, but the chance to build something better. When Kale kisses her this time, it's with the desperate hunger of a man who might be saying goodbye. But when they break apart, his eyes burn with renewed purpose, and Isla knows that whatever happens in the next hour, they'll face it together. Outside, Darius grows impatient, his howls taking on an edge of frustrated rage. But inside the cabin, the Alpha King prepares for the fight of his life, armed with something his brother has never possessed. The absolute certainty that some things are worth dying for, and the love of a woman who believes he can win. The formal challenge rings across the clearing with the weight of ancient law. Kale steps onto the porch in human form, his voice carrying supernatural authority as he addresses the gathered wolves. Darius Thornwick, Beta of the Northern Packs, I acknowledge your challenge and invoke my right as Alpha King to set the terms of combat. Single combat, to the death, with the throne as prize. Do you accept? The Silver Wolf's response comes as a rumbling growl that somehow forms words. I accept, brother. Let us finish what should have ended years ago. What follows is a transformation that will haunt Isla's dreams for years to come. Kale's human form doesn't simply shift. It explodes outward in a symphony of cracking bones and reforming flesh that should be agonizing, but instead seems to liberate something wild and magnificent. In seconds, where a man had stood, a black wolf of impossible size plants himself between the cabin and his enemies. Even among shifters, Kale is extraordinary. His wolf form stands nearly 4 feet at the shoulder, his midnight coat gleaming with an almost metallic sheen. But it's his presence that truly marks him as royalty. An aura of absolute authority that makes the other wolves drop to their bellies in automatic submission. All except Darius, who meets his brother's transformed gaze with equal intensity. The two wolves circle each other in the clearing's center, and Isla understands she's witnessing something primal and sacred. A ritual older than civilization, where leadership is earned through strength and courage rather than politics or birthright. The assembled pack watches in absolute silence, even their breathing muted with reverence for what's about to unfold. Darius strikes first, launching himself at Kale's throat with speed that blurs the line between animal and supernatural force. But Kale is ready, twisting aside at the last instant, and catching his brother's flank with claws that draw parallel lines of crimson across silver fur. They separate, circle again, looking for openings while testing each other's reflexes and resolve. The second exchange is more vicious. Darius feints left, then drives his shoulder into Kale's ribs with enough force to snap human bones. Kale stumbles but recovers quickly, retaliating with a bite that would have crushed Darius's spine if it had landed. Instead, his jaws close on empty air as his brother spins away, already positioning for the next attack. From the cabin porch, Isla watches with growing horror as the brothers tear into each other with savage precision. These aren't wild animals fighting on instinct, they're warriors who know each other's every move, every strength and weakness, using that intimate knowledge to inflict maximum damage. Blood spatters the ground beneath them, and she can see that both wolves are already bearing serious injuries. But something is wrong. As the fight progresses, Isla notices that Darius's wounds are healing almost instantly while Kale's remain open and bleeding. The silver wolf moves with increasing confidence, while the Alpha King begins to show signs of fatigue that shouldn't be possible so early in the combat. He's been poisoned, Isla breathes, understanding flooding through her with horrible clarity. She remembers Kale's unusually slow healing during his first night in the cabin, how his body had seemed to struggle with injuries that should have been minor. That's why the original wounds took so long to heal. That's why he's weakening now. Without conscious thought, she finds herself moving toward the fight, driven by the same instinct that had made her help an injured wolf in a storm. But before she can take more than a few steps, one of Darius's allies blocks her path, a brown wolf with scars across his muzzle, and eyes that promise death if she interferes. This is pack law. The wolf speaks without breaking form. Humans have no place in our justice. Your justice is a lie, Isla snarls back, surprising herself with the venom in her voice. You've poisoned him. This isn't a fair fight. The scarred wolf's lips pull back in what might be amusement. All's fair in challenges to the throne. The Alpha King should have been more careful about what he ate and drank while hiding in human territory. The revelation hits her like a physical blow. They'd been planning this for longer than she'd realized, weakening Kale slowly over days or weeks until he was vulnerable enough for Darius to defeat. What she'd interpreted as his unusual injuries had actually been the beginning of an assassination plot that turned her cabin into the perfect killing ground. In the clearing, Kale staggers under another of Darius's attacks, his movements growing sluggish as the poison works through his system. Blood flows freely from a gash across his ribs, and Isla can see that he's fighting not just his brother but his own body's betrayal. At this rate, he'll collapse within minutes, leaving Darius to claim the throne and execute the woman who dared interfere in pack politics. He's going to die, she whispers, the words torn from her throat like a physical wound. Yes, the scarred wolf agrees with satisfaction. And then you'll join him. The new Alpha King has no use for humans who think they can play in supernatural politics. But as Isla watches Kale fighting for his life against impossible odds, something fierce and protective awakens in her chest. She thinks of the wolf who'd collapsed on her doorstep, trusting her with his life despite having every reason to fear human betrayal. She thinks of the man who'd held her with desperate tenderness, promising to build a better world where strength didn't require cruelty. She thinks of the king, who'd chosen love over fear, mercy over dominance. Even when that choice cost him everything he'd built, he'd shown her what real strength looked like. Now it's time to return the favor. You're right, she tells the scarred wolf, her voice carrying new resolve. I don't belong in supernatural politics. But this isn't politics, it's love. And love doesn't follow anyone's rules. Before the brown wolf can react, Isla sprints toward the cabin, ignoring his snarls of outrage. She has one chance to save the man who'd changed her world, and she's not going to waste it second-guessing herself. Behind her, chaos erupts as the pack realizes the human is about to interfere in their sacred challenge. But Isla is already through the cabin door, reaching for the one weapon that might level the playing field between love and betrayal. Isla's veterinary bag sits where she left it by the fireplace, filled with medications that had seemed routine just hours ago but now represent her only chance to save the man she loves. Her hands shake as she searches through vials and syringes, looking for the one substance that might counteract whatever poison courses through Kale's system. Naloxone. Used to reverse opioid overdoses in animals, it works by blocking receptor sites and temporarily negating the effects of certain toxins. It's not perfect. She has no idea what specific poison Darius used, but it's better than watching Kale die without fighting back. Behind her, the cabin door explodes inward. The scarred wolf stands in the entrance, his brown fur bristling with rage. "Step away from the bag, human. Your interference ends here." "My interference," Isla says, palming the naloxone while facing him, "is what saved your Alpha King's life once before. Maybe you should consider that before deciding I'm the enemy." "Kale is no longer our king," the wolf snarls. "Darius leads the pack now, and he has no use for human healers who think they understand pack law." Through the open door, she can hear the sounds of combat growing weaker. Kale's movements becoming sluggish as the poison takes its toll. Time is running out, and she's trapped by an enemy who sees her as nothing more than collateral damage in a supernatural power struggle. But as the brown wolf advances, something extraordinary happens. From the forest beyond the clearing, new howls rise, not the triumphant cries of Darius's supporters, but something else entirely. Voices calling in harmony, dozens of them, growing closer with each passing second. The scarred wolf freezes, his ears pricking forward with confusion. "Impossible," he breathes. "The northern packs were destroyed. There are no allies left." "Maybe," Isla says, hope blooming in her chest. "Your information was wrong." What emerges from the tree line makes her believe in miracles. Wolves pour into the clearing from all directions, not the coordinated assault force Darius had brought, but something far more powerful. These are the survivors, the scattered remnants of packs that had been thought extinct, led by a magnificent white she-wolf whose bearing speaks of ancient authority. "Grandmother," the scarred wolf whispers, his aggression melting into shock. The white wolf's voice carries across the clearing with supernatural resonance. "Stand down, Garrett. This challenge was won through treachery, not strength. Pack law demands justice." In the clearing center, Darius wheels to face this new threat, his confidence finally cracking. "Lydia, this doesn't concern the Elder Council. This is Northern Pack business. When the Alpha King is murdered through poison instead of honorable combat, it becomes everyone's business." "The white wolf," Lydia replies with deadly calm. "Release the antidote, nephew, or face the consequences of breaking laws older than your bloodline." The revelation hits Isla like lightning. Lydia isn't just any elder, she's Darius's grandmother, the former Alpha Queen whose authority transcends current pack politics, and she's here to ensure that honor prevails over ambition. But Darius's response comes as a desperate snarl. "The old ways are dead, grandmother. This is the new order: strength without mercy, power without compromise. The human dies with him." As he lunges toward Kale for what should be the killing blow, Isla makes her choice. Breaking free from the brown wolf's shocked paralysis, she races toward the fight with the naloxone ready. She won't reach Kale in time to inject him, but she might be able to get close enough. The syringe leaves her hand in a perfect arc, catching Darius in the shoulder as he bears down on his weakened brother. The silver wolf stumbles, confused by the sudden sting, giving Kale the opening he needs to roll away from certain death. But the naloxone isn't meant for Darius, it's meant for Kale. As understanding dawns, Isla watches in horror as the antidote that should save the king instead flows through his enemy's bloodstream. She's just made a terrible mistake, potentially dooming them both. Then she sees something that changes everything. As the naloxone spreads through Darius's system, his movements become sluggish, his supernatural strength beginning to fade. He's been using the same poison to enhance his own abilities, not just weakening Kale. but artificially boosting his own speed and healing. The antidote doesn't just neutralize toxins, it levels the playing field entirely. Now, Isla screams to Kale. While he's vulnerable, the Alpha King doesn't waste the opportunity. With Darius momentarily stunned and his enhanced abilities failing, Kale strikes with the precision of a natural-born predator. His jaws close around his brother's throat, not to kill, but to dominate the traditional submission hold that marks the end of a formal challenge. For a moment, the clearing holds its collective breath. Then Darius goes limp in defeat, his body language conveying acceptance of his brother's victory. When Kale releases him, the silver wolf collapses to the ground, no longer a threat to anyone. "It's over," Lydia announces, her voice carrying across the gathered packs with finality. "The true Alpha King has prevailed. Long live King Kale." The howls that rise in response seem to shake the very mountains, a chorus of voices acknowledging not just victory but vindication. As the sound fades, Kale shifts back to human form, naked and bloodied but alive, his golden eyes seeking Isla across the clearing. When she runs to him, he catches her in arms that shake with exhaustion and relief. "You saved me," he whispers against her hair. "You saved us all." "We saved each other," she corrects, holding him tight enough to convince herself he's real. That's what partners do. Around them, the gathered wolves begin to shift to human form, revealing the faces of the allies Kale had thought lost forever. The Alpha King's reign isn't ending, it's being reborn. Stronger than before because it's built on truth instead of fear, love instead of domination. As the sun sets over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Isla realizes their story is just beginning. The woman who'd given sanctuary to a wounded wolf has found her place in a world she'd never imagined, standing beside the king who'd chosen evolution over tradition. Together, they'll build something unprecedented, a realm where strength serves compassion, where different species can coexist, where love truly can conquer the ancient divisions that have kept their worlds apart. 3 days later, the cabin has been transformed into an impromptu diplomatic center. Representatives from a dozen different packs fill the small space, their conversations a mixture of human speech and wolf communication that creates a symphony of supernatural politics. But for all the chaos of rebuilding a fractured alliance, Isla finds herself drawn to quiet moments with Kale, stolen conversations where they can simply be themselves instead of queen-in-waiting and king. "Are you sure about this?" she asks him on the third evening, as they stand on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of fire. "Everything that's happening, everything that's going to change, it's happening so fast." Kale's arm tightens around her waist, his presence warm and solid against her side. "The speed isn't what scares me," he admits quietly. "It's the permanence. Once we make this official, once you accept the crown, there's no going back to your old life. No returning to the safety of human anonymity." "Is that what you think I want? To go back?" "I think," he says carefully, "that I've asked you to give up everything you've ever known for a world you've barely begun to understand. That's not a small sacrifice, and I need to know you're making it freely, not out of obligation or gratitude." "Too?" Isla turns in his arms, studying his face in the dying light. Even after everything they've been through, he's still trying to protect her from her own choices, still convinced that loving him might be more burden than blessing. "Kale, look at me." When their eyes meet, she sees the vulnerability he keeps hidden behind royal composure, the fear that she'll realize what she's gotten herself into and run, the desperate hope that what they have is real enough to survive the pressures about to descend on them. "The night you collapsed on my doorstep," she says, "I was the loneliest person in the world, abandoned by my own species, exiled from everything I'd worked to build, and convinced that trusting others would only lead to more betrayal." Her hands frame his face, thumbs tracing the sharp line of his cheekbones. "You didn't just save my life by giving me purpose again. You saved my soul by teaching me that isolation isn't strength, it's just another kind of death. Isla, I'm not finished, she interrupts gently. You keep talking about what I'm giving up, but you're ignoring what I'm gaining. A world where my skills matter, where protecting animals isn't a liability but a sacred calling. A partner who sees my strength instead of my weakness, who values my healing abilities instead of fearing them. She rises on her toes, bringing her lips closer to his. A love that's worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth reshaping the world for. When she kisses him, it's with the fierce certainty of a woman who's found her destiny and refuses to let fear steal it away. Kale responds with equal passion, his arms crushing her against him as if he can anchor them both to this moment of perfect understanding. When they break apart, both breathless, his golden eyes burn with an intensity that makes her feel cherished, chosen, essential. I love you, he says, the words carrying the weight of absolute truth, not just for what you've given me, but for who you are, the healer who sees past surface wounds to deeper hurts, the woman who chose compassion over safety, love over fear. His forehead rests against hers, their breathing synchronized in the space between them. The queen my people need, even if they don't realize it yet. Queen, Isla repeats, testing the word on her tongue. I never imagined myself as royalty. Neither did I, until I met you, Kale admits. Royalty isn't about crowns or ceremonies, it's about serving something larger than yourself, making sacrifices for the greater good. You've been royal since the night you opened your door to a dying wolf. From inside the cabin comes the sound of voices rising in what might be an argument between pack representatives. Their private moment is ending, pulled back into the complex negotiations that will determine the future of shifter society. But as they turn to face whatever challenges await, Isla feels something she hasn't experienced since her career's destruction. Absolute certainty that she's exactly where she belongs. Ready to change the world? Kale asks, offering his hand. With you? She replies, taking it without hesitation. Always. 6 months later, the Cascade Territory has become something unprecedented in shifter history. A sanctuary where old prejudices are slowly giving way to new possibilities. The formal coronation had been a spectacle that drew representatives from across North America. But it's the quiet daily work of building bridges between species that truly marks the reign of King Kale and Queen Isla. The healing center Isla established combines human veterinary knowledge with shifter healing traditions, creating treatments more effective than either species had achieved alone. Pack members who once viewed humans with suspicion now bring their cubs to the Queen Healer, with trust born of demonstrated results. Human researchers, carefully vetted and sworn to secrecy, collaborate on studies that advance understanding of supernatural physiology without compromising security. Not everything has been smooth. The integration of human and shifter societies faces resistance from traditionalists on both sides. And there are still those who see Isla as an interloper rather than a bridge builder. But each small victory, each successful treatment, each peaceful negotiation, each moment of understanding between former enemies reinforces the foundation they're building together. The Northern Territory reports are in, Kale says, entering Isla's treatment room where she's checking on a young wolf recovering from a badly healed fracture. 3 more packs have requested integration assistance. Word is spreading. Isla looks up from her patient, an adolescent shifter whose injured leg had been set improperly by traditional pack healers, requiring surgical correction that combined her human training with supernatural healing techniques. The wolf pup's tail wags weakly as she approaches, golden eyes bright with trust that would have been unthinkable before her reign began. How's our patient today? She asks, gently manipulating the healing limb. The bone has set perfectly, and supernatural healing is already reinforcing the surgical work. Within a week, he'll be running with his pack again, stronger than before. Better, the young wolf manages to communicate, his voice a mixture of human speech and wolf vocalizations that still amazes Isla. Thank you, my queen. Just Isla, she corrects gently, as she always does. We're all family here. After ensuring her,